You're listening to the Fresh Hell podcast. Fresh Hell contains stories of a disturbing and often graphic nature and is intended for a mature audience. Please don't let your kids listen to this, or they might turn out like us.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Lieb.
And I'm Jason Horton.
And we're the hosts of Ghost Town, a comedy podcast about all places abandoned, tragic, mysterious, haunted, and true crimey.
That's not a word. We cover all kinds of locations like
the Los Feliz Murder House,
an LA murder frozen in time, Action Park,
the world's most dangerous amusement park, John Benet Ramsey's house, Woodstock 99, the Cecil Hotel, and the Black House.
Ooh, Satan. So pause the podcast you're currently listening to immediately and go subscribe to Ghost Town.
You can find us at Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Fresh Hell Podcast. I'm Johanna from Vienna, Austria.
And I'm Annie, just outside Boston, Massachusetts. And you just heard Jason and Rebecca from the Ghost Town podcast. If you like to hear about some spooky places, then maybe their podcast would be right up your alley. And I just saw that they've done a mini episode on the Witch Mansion in Salem. I haven't had a chance to listen to it yet, but I bet it's just full of spooky fuckery. I'm definitely going to check it out.
If you are a first-time listener, you might need to know that Annie and I never met in real life. Yet. And doing this podcast together is kind of interesting and weird because as you get to know us better, we also get to know each other better.
Yeah, exactly. So this is like a conversational style podcast. You're getting to know us while we're getting to know each other. It's fun. So that being said, let's dive right into today's hellish topic, shall we?
Yes, let's. I think October is the absolute right time to cover this case. Annie, I know you were raised Catholic, so let me ask you one question. Do you believe in demons?
I don't really. I believe in personal demons, but I'm less sure about actual demons. I'd say that I was raised Catholic, but now I'm agnostic, and I'm pretty agnostic about demons too, but definitely leaning more toward no. Plus, I feel like I'm super safe from possession because no one wants this body. They'd spit me back out again when they realize nothing works right and everything hurts.
Yeah, but don't demons give their hosts like super strength and stuff? Like then you can jump 2 meters in the air and I don't know, maybe it would be worth to check that option out.
Listen, if that's an option, I'm open to negotiation, but I don't think it's a thing.
Well, I actually don't believe in demons either, even though I'm Catholic. For us Austrians, our belief system is often a bit random. But hey, if any demons are listening right now, this is just my opinion. Don't come for me. I could be wrong. I very often am.
Yeah, me too. So you've probably guessed it. Today, we're going to be talking about demons. We're going to tell you about the Exorcism of Anneliese Michel. Did I pronounce that right?
Yeah, it's pretty much okay.
And Hellions, let us just tell you right from the beginning that this one is rough. It's really fucking bad. And you know that we're not casual about profanity, are we? So, Johanna, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about Anneliese?
So Anneliese Michel was born as Anna Elisabeth Michel on 21st of September 1952 in Leibelfing. So that's a small village with nowadays around 4,000 inhabitants in Bavaria. It's actually just 1 hour drive from the Austrian border. And let me tell you, I think it is safe to assume that this small village in Bavaria was not so different from the similar-sized villages that my parents grew up in. You have to know one thing, that Bavaria and Austria are very, very similar, while Bavaria, for example, and the north of Germany don't have so much in common, if that makes sense to you. I have an example, like most of Germany is Protestant, right? Mm-hmm. But Bavaria, just like Austria, is Catholic.
Okay.
Her parents were devoted Catholics. Anneliese's father, Josef Michel, was supposed to become a priest, and he even had 3 aunts who were nuns. But he started to learn his father's trade, which was carpenter. And then the war happened, and Josef Michel was sent to the Western and to the Eastern Front, and at one point he was even captured by US soldiers. But in the summer of 1945 he returned from war captivity, and he went back to trade school, and finally he could take over his family's business in 1948. Now Anneliese's mother, her name was Anna Fürg, and she had met Josef Michel through her mother. Now here come some facts that really show how Catholic this small community still were during the 50s, 60s and 70s. Who am I kidding? In some parts I'm sure it still is a little bit like that. So Anna had born a child out of wedlock in 1948, and this was after the war years. During war, while still shocking, it was a little bit easier to accept children being born out of wedlock. It was war, chaos, men died. But 1948, things had started to go back to normal, and having a child without being married, huge scandal, especially in a small Bavarian town. Now, allegedly, Anna's mother had asked acquaintances of her, who were church representatives from Würzburg, to introduce a nice Catholic boy to her daughter. Did Anna's mother donate a large amount of money to the church to make this even happen? Some say yes. The official story was that the two had met through the family's businesses. Now, I have to add one thing. I read one source that stated that Anna got pregnant while she was already dating Josef, but I could not verify this. It's another information I have. Make of it as you want. Most sources state that they met after the child was born. Anna and Josef are introduced and they get married in 1950. The first child, a girl named Marta, the one that was born out of wedlock, dies in 1956 from a kidney tumor. And because she is an illegitimate child, she is not buried in the family grave, but in a separate grave near the cemetery wall.
I hate this sort of stuff. It really bothers me the way people used to, and sometimes still do, look at families. That poor kid.
And as I said before, Anneliese Michel is born in 1952. She has 3 younger sisters born in 1954, 1956, and 1957. And that sounds unbelievably hard to me to imagine that Anna the mother was constantly being pregnant while also having toddlers around.
Oh yeah, that's the Catholic way. Eventually, they'll start to get old enough to take care of the little ones. But yeah, that definitely would have been the norm. I mean, it's also kind of the norm for Catholics in this time period sometimes too.
Yeah, I mean, my mom has 6 siblings.
Yeah.
So there you go. The family lives now in Klingenberg, the hometown of Anneliese's father. It's a similar-sized village, but in the Bavarian district of Unterfranken, and it's 330 kilometers or 205 miles northwest of Leibelfink. And since her early childhood, Anneliese was a rather sickly child, very lovable, kind, but also an introvert and very serious. She was always trying to help others. She first attended elementary school and later a gymnasium. Let's just say high school, because the Austrian and German school system is a little bit different from the system in the US, and I don't think I have to get into the details here. So she attended high school.
Yeah.
So she's a good student, she learns to play the piano and the accordion, she likes gymnastics, and she's also, like the rest of her family, a devoted Catholic. And often Anneliese would sleep on the floor to atone for other people's sins. And also when she is as young as 6 years old, the girl has to attend morning mass almost every day, which means she has to get up at 6 a.m. latest to get there in time. Often the young girl would feel sick by the heavy frankincense.
This is foreshadowing. And also, this is fucking horrific. That child is too young to be atoning for anything.
Right?
Yeah.
Seriously, she shouldn't even know what that means.
No.
So, in September of 1968, Anneliese suffered from a first seizure attack, followed by a second one in August of 1969. And I remember reading that she bit her own tongue during one of these seizure attacks, which, unfortunately, we know that can happen. So, she went through a thorough neurological examination. I mean, let's face it, as thorough as it was probably possible back in those days. And the doctors diagnosed a cerebral seizure disorder. So, basically, epilepsy, and she was prescribed medication.
Yeah, epilepsy is the most common of the serious brain disorders, and the word epilepsy actually comes from the Greek, meaning to be seized and overwhelmed by surprise, which is pretty fitting. So people used to believe that seizures were caused by all sorts of things, and of course, demonic possession was one of them. But I did a little bit of research, and this fact shocked me. So according to a 2003 paper by the International League Against Epilepsy, which it sounds like it's against people with epilepsy, but it's actually a group that's been around since like 1909, trying to myth bust the disease and educate the public.
Okay.
But International League Against Epilepsy sounds like not great, but is great. So according to their paper, and this is quote, legislation based on centuries of stigma has either been repealed only relatively recently or, in many countries, still exists. In the United States, for instance, people with epilepsy were forbidden to marry in 17 states until 1956. The last state to repeal this law did so only in 1980. In 1956, 18 states provided for the sterilization on eugenic grounds of people with epilepsy. In the United Kingdom, a law prohibiting people with epilepsy from marrying was repealed in 1970. In some parts of the world, epilepsy is still commonly viewed as a reason for annulling marriages or simply prohibiting them. End quote.
Wow.
Yeah, that shocked me. I have loved ones living with epilepsy, and I thought I'd read up on it. I'm sure many of our listeners also have people they love who have epilepsy or might have it themselves, and so they know that in reality, people with epilepsy are just as intelligent and lovely and wonderful as anybody else. But like most chronic illness, it has its own challenges to cope with. And in Anneliese's case, the medical professionals believed that she was also suffering from psychosis due to mental illness. So if that and the epilepsy wasn't enough, shortly after her neurological diagnosis, she started to get sick from a lung infection and tuberculosis. And as Johanna said before, she was not a healthy child. Or as my dad would say, if it's not bedbugs, it's cockroaches. This poor girl, it's like nothing ever goes right for her. Because of her tuberculosis and lung infection, Anneliese is sent to a sanatorium that specialized in treating lung diseases. And she stays there for 6 months, from March until August of 1970. During that time, she suffered from several seizures, and if this isn't bad enough, Anneliese's teenage years were made even harder by her very strict upbringing. Her mother forbade her to attend dances or to go on dates or even meet up with her girlfriends. Oftentimes, she would just lie on her bed crying about the fact that her classmates were allowed to go out and have fun doing typical teenager activities, and she was stuck at home. An unsurprising consequence of this very strict rules of her upbringing is that Anneliese feels more and more isolated. Then, during spring of 1973, when Anneliese is 21 years old, she starts to complain about strange knocking sounds that she hears in her room, coming from under the floorboards, coming from the ceiling, and coming from the closet. She also describes voices. They talk to her, and they're from hell. They tell her she will endure eternal damnation and end up in hell. So, that's not good. What's the solution? I would say back to the doctor to have those psych meds evaluated, but no. The answer for Anneliese was more religion. And so a couple of months later, she went on a pilgrimage with her father to San Damiano.
Yeah, and that is quite interesting. So San Damiano is like, for example, Medjugorje in Bosnia, not recognized as a place of pilgrimage, which basically means me, for example, as a Roman Catholic, I wouldn't go there as a pilgrim. Now, we are not talking about San Damiano in the Italian province of Perugia. That would be the place where the miracle of St. Francis of Assisi took place, and he is my favorite saint, by the way, because he protects the animals.
Yeah, he's my favorite too. Unless you've lost something, then you definitely need St. Anthony.
And St. Florian is also a good one, because we don't want our house to burn down.
Oh yeah.
But we are talking about San Damiano in the Italian province of Piacenza, that's in the north of Italy, close to Milan. So what happened there? Between the years of 1961 and 1981, every Friday, the Virgin Mary would appear to the farmer's wife Rosa Quattrini Puzzini, also lovingly called Mamma Rosa. In total, the Virgin Mary visited Mamma Rosa around 2,000 times and had almost as many messages for her. She told her, for example, quote, "Jesus chose you as his instrument as you are most unknowing," end quote. I'm not sure if that is what I would want to hear from Virgin Mary, but okay.
Right.
To be fair, the Virgin did cure Mamma Rosa on her first visit in 1961 because the farmer's wife was almost dying of an infection. I read somewhere because of botched cesarean section. She got an infection because of that.
Oh. And the Virgin Mary healed it. Did she? Every Friday. She appeared every Friday.
Yeah, at 12 o'clock.
Oh, see, now, by any chance, did Mama Rosa prepare wild mushrooms with her breakfast every Friday? These stories are where I'm such the skeptic. But, listen, stranger things have happened.
Look. Who knows? I'm pretty skeptical about miracles myself. I don't even know how that works. Wouldn't the Virgin Mary have more important things to do?
You would think.
Yeah, also, how do they pick who they are going to help? There are so many people suffering. Do they pick straws? I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever. Word on the street in San Damiano is that the Virgin Mary appears to Mamma Rosa. And as if healing Mamma Rosa wasn't enough, there are also 2 miracles that allegedly happened in San Damiano. The first miracle was the Virgin Mary ordered Mama Rosa to dig up a well, and this well provided everyone with miracle water. But only one person was allowed to get the water from the well, while everybody else, so basically later on the pilgrims, had to pray 10 Ave Marias.
Which, for our non-Catholic or heathen hellions, is the Hail Mary in Latin. So I've said a lot of Hail Marys in confession, and I've sang a lot of Ave Marias for friends at weddings. What was the other miracle?
The second miracle was a pear tree in bloom after a vision in the fall.
Okay.
Whatever. Back to the miracle water. It is said that if you drink the miracle water of San Damiano, all the demons that possess you will leave your body and you are healed. Now, as I said before, the Catholic Church hasn't recognized the miracles of San Damiano yet. As far as I understand, people are still working on getting that done. I don't know how that works. I guess there's a lot of church politics involved.
Oh yeah, probably shocking amounts of red tape involved in beatification, which is the making of a saint for all you non-Catholic.
I also read that the Vatican did send another priest to investigate San Damiano after everything that had happened to Anneliese, because they wanted to check if the miracles were actually demons trying to do the devil's work. And this priest left convinced that Mama Rosa and her interactions with the Virgin Mary were in fact legit. Anyway, I think that's all you need to know about San Damiano.
Yeah, that probably covers it. So back to the Michels, and they were, if it wasn't obvious yet, dangerously strict Catholics, like bury your illegitimate child who died of a kidney tumor near the cemetery wall kind of strict Catholics. Still, Josef Michel had been to San Damiano before, and so in the summer of 1973, he decides to take his very religious but also clearly suffering daughter Anneliese with him. Tia Hein, the woman leading the pilgrimage group from Bavaria, who was also a prophet chosen by Mama Rosa herself, she remembers that when she tried to give Anneliese the miracle water to drink, the young woman refuses and pushes the water away and says that it smells bad. Very clearly a sign of demonic possession. Or maybe the water just did smell bad. I've had Fountain of Youth water in St. Augustine, and brace yourself. It did not make me look younger, and it smells and tastes like sulfur. Talk about Satan's water.
Yeah. My grandmother, she used to have a flask shaped like the Virgin Mary, and it contained miracle water from Lourdes. I was never allowed to open it though, so I can't tell you how that smelled.
Same. There used to be weird little flasks of holy water from different places like this all over my aunt's house and my parents' house that probably my mom's aunts and uncles, who were mostly Jesuits and nuns, had probably given her. But yeah, I was never allowed to open it or touch it or use it either. But Anneliese was still very impressed by San Damiano and by Mama Rosa. In letters to her friends, she talks about her time there in a very excited way, and this pilgrimage won't be her last one. She kept traveling to that little village in Italy regularly throughout that summer. However, Anneliese and her father return home, and in the fall of 1973, Anneliese Michel starts to study education at the university in Würzburg. She wants to be a teacher, and she's focusing on theological education, and she moves into a student dormitory. She also starts treatment at the university hospital because, unfortunately, she now begins to have seizures every day, and they once more diagnose her with a form of epilepsy as well as, quote, neurotic depression. They also run another EEG on her brain, and they discover a damaged part in the area of her left temple that they believe to be the root of her seizures. So she's on anti-seizure meds and she's on antipsychotic meds. But I guess this diagnosis was not good enough for Tia Hein, because don't you remember how Anneliese refused to drink that miracle water? And didn't she also see that Anneliese had problems touching religious objects? And didn't Anneliese herself talk about voices from hell communicating with her? Obviously, the doctors were wrong, and Anneliese was indeed terrorized by demons. So, Tia Hein contacts a priest from Aschaffenburg and introduces him to Anneliese. But this priest doesn't see any sign of demonic activity. Because there aren't any. This girl has severe epilepsy compounded by mental illness. But that's not a good enough explanation for her family. So another priest needs to be found, one that understands the severity of this situation. And the next priest, Ernst Alt, suggests to seek help from medical professionals, which is, again, not what they wanted to hear, not good enough for Tia Hein. Third time's the charm when she contacts Father Adolf Rodewijk.
Basically, if you don't like what experts and doctors are telling you, just keep looking until you find an quote-unquote expert who agrees with you.
Yeah, it's a classic ploy. It's still used today by flat earthers and anti-vaxxers. So tell us, did they find a suitable expert?
Thank God they did. They did find one in Father Adolf Rodewig, who was the expert. He had written 2 standard reference works on demonology, and he had done some exorcisms before already, as far as I understand. Thea Heine told him everything that had been going on with Anneliese Michel, and immediately he recognized clear signs of demonic possession. So this expert's opinion kind of convinces Ernst Alt there really might be some devilish things going on with the young woman. So he finally agrees to seeing Anneliese Michel regularly, first every 2 weeks, later every month. And through these meetings, Ernst Alt came to the conclusion that Anneliese Michel was not yet possessed by demons, but that she was tormented by demons, who tried to take possession of her. He told Anneliese that she should choose a spiritual counselor who would help her to stay strong in her faith and to ward off the demons. I think to no one's surprise, Anneliese chose Ernst Alt as her spiritual counselor.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of gotta, right?
Who else is there?
I mean...
On 1st of July 1975, Ernst Alt held the first exorcism, and that was the so-called Exorcismus probativus, so basically a trial exorcism for Anneliese.
Yeah, I honestly know very little about exorcism. Once, in an argument with someone, I dipped my fingers in my water glass and shrieked, "The power of Christ compels you," at them while, splattering them with tap water. It wasn't received well.
Weirdly.
Yeah, no. They were being super irrational, though, at the time, so I defend my position. But, yeah, that's pretty much the extent of my exorcism experience, so could you explain a little?
Yeah, okay, so a little bit of background here. In the Catholic Church, you have different rituals for exorcisms. There's the first level, the entry level of exorcism, if you may. It's the so-called prayer of deliverance, and that can be said by anyone, by you, by me, by anyone. Now, the official exorcism rituals are divided into the minor and the major exorcism, and they can only be held by a priest. Fun fact! Tiny form of an exorcism prayer is always included in a baptism, and if a priest wants to do an exorcism outside of a baptism, he needs to ask a bishop for permission to do so. The minor exorcism is a little bit of praying, and it's basically done to ward off the evil spirits.
I did not know that about baptism. I knew they had to get permission for, the big guns, but I didn't know that about baptism. I think most new parents would agree that demonic possession of their new baby seems utterly plausible when the screaming just won't stop, but that would be just such a really clever long game for a demon to play, wouldn't it? Let me get in real early and just be helpless for years. Again, that is very sneaky and demon-like.
I think you want to get them early.
Oh no. Probably.
It's okay, minor exorcism. And then there is the major exorcism, the big guns, if you will. To be allowed to perform a major exorcism, the priest has to make sure that he is in fact dealing with demons and not some mental illness. I have no idea how they do that, actually. Do they have a checklist or whatever, or do they need, some psychiatrists' evaluation? I have no idea.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think they just go look and say, yeah, that's a demon.
Yeah.
Right there, that's a demon.
Because they're the only ones qualified to say when it's a demon.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So if you're the authority on demons, then...
But psychiatrist would know if he's dealing with a demon. Psychiatrist would always say, yeah, that's a mental illness.
Exactly, and they did. They diagnosed her and were treating her with antipsychotics. And then the priest comes in and oh no, you don't need meds. That's demons. It's like when I had ghosts in my eyes last week.
Yeah, well, okay, so they determine that yes, this is indeed a demon who is disturbing this poor soul, and now they can start with all the rituals and prayers and the whole razzle-dazzle. And it's a lot. It includes preparations and prayers and readings from the Bible. I have a list. It's in German. I didn't find any translated list. It doesn't really matter. It shows all the many steps that are involved in a major exorcism, and we will post it to our Facebook group, just to give you an idea how elaborated that is.
Yeah, but we're not recommending you actually attempt an exorcism at home. If you do think it's needed, please contact a professional or you'll just piss whatever is tormenting you off, allegedly. I watch paranormal shows. I know what's up. All right, so Father Alt, he holds the first trial exorcism, and Anneliese allegedly breaks her rosary in the process. Horror. And this reaction leads the priest to believe that he is indeed on the right track here, which seems to me like a real overreaction because it's not like strands of beads are known for their durability, right? But anyway, yeah, so on August the 3rd, the first minor exorcism is held. And that's pretty much the moment when things really start to fall apart for Anneliese and she gets worse and worse instead of better. She barely sleeps, she loses weight rapidly, which is due to her refusing to eat most of the time, and she experiences aggressive compulsions to move and periods of self-harm. She also begins to eat insects and to drink her own urine. So she is in a really, really bad way psychologically. Attending university is now impossible as she is too weak and sick to even leave the house. Now, according to Father Ernst Alt himself, he did advise the family again to seek the help of medical professionals and to have Anneliese admitted to the hospital. But Josef and Anna and Anneliese, and probably Tia Hein, they didn't want to hear any of that. In their opinion, Anneliese is indeed tormented by demons, and doctors and hospitals can't help her for this kind of issue. I also had read that another reason for them to refuse to see the doctors was that they feared Anneliese would not be able to work as a teacher if she was diagnosed with mental illness. So, the priorities of these people, honestly.
Or as you would normally say, who are these people?
Who are these people? I know, honestly.
So in September of 1975, the Bishop of Würzburg sends the great expert in all things demon, Adolf Rodewig, to see Anneliese and to make an assessment of the situation. And he comes to the conclusion, it is time for the major exorcism. And the bishop permits it, and they appoint Father Arnold Renz as exorcist for Anneliese Michel. So he starts with the first major exorcism on 24th September 1975. What's interesting to know is that starting with the second major exorcism, they did also start to record audio tapes during the rituals. And on them you can hear the priest and Anneliese Michel, and Anneliese is talking with a very... I don't even know how to describe it.
Yeah, no, it's bad. It sounds like most of the movie exorcisms sound. It's upsetting.
Her voice is definitely not the voice of a young woman, and she screams and swears a lot, which was nothing she would usually do. So all these are signs for the priest that demons did take over Anneliese and they are talking through her. Yes, I said demons. Because she's not only possessed by one demon, but 6, and Anneliese names them all. So one is Lucifer, and the other 5 are human demons. So there's Cain, there is Judas, there is Nero, Hitler, and Valentin Fleischmann. Who is Valentin Fleischmann?
Oh.
You might ask.
Yeah.
Who the fuck is that?
I was just about to.
He was a priest from the 16th century, and rumor has it that he fathered 4 children and that he was a murderer.
Ugh, listen, that's too many demons. Plus Lucifer? Really? Satan himself had nothing better to do than possess this girl? Ay. So anyway, the demons also tell the priest that the reason for Anneliese's demonic possession was... Are you ready for this? First of all, she was cursed before she was even born by one of her mother's neighbors because of the sin that her mother had committed, meaning giving birth to a child out of wedlock. So, Anneliese's older sister's birth was a reason to curse Anneliese. Sure, that makes sense. Secondly, Anneliese suffers from an expatriatory possession. That means that basically she has to suffer to save others from eternal damnation. In other words, you've got your typical religious delusions of grandeur and persecution. Now, to give you an idea of how these voices sounded, these demons, we're going to play an extract from one of the tapes, but this is, just be warned, this is a little bit disturbing. Maybe don't listen to this right before bed.
Yeah. Please don't worry that it is all in German and that you won't understand anything, because honestly it is very hard to understand even for me, even if you speak German. You still can get an idea of what was going on with Anneliese. And we will also link a video that provides subtitles in our Facebook group.
Rosenkranzmonat, weißt du ja, ne?
Ja,
Rosenkranz.
aber die wenigste beten.
Die wenigste Beten.
Ja. In der Kirche wird auch mal der wenigste Gebet, weil die ein Pfarrer ja das für unmodern halte.
Ja.
Ja.
Alle?
Fast. Die sind ja so blöd, wenn sie eine Ahnung hätten. Ah!
Warum betest du die Rosenkranz?
Warum?
Ja, warum?
Ah! Weil sind der Drecksau aus Westbuchstaben, kapiert? Aber es ist vor allem ein Auftrag von dir, doch. Was fressest du das nicht?
Noch mehr.
Halt dir mal!
Noch mehr.
Die müssen als Priester erkennbar sein. Und zweimal, kapiert?
Noch mehr.
Ja.
Noch mehr.
Heiraten dürfen sie auch nicht. Ein Auftrag von dir. Ja!
Noch mehr sagen.
Und in die kirchlichen Dienst dürfen sie auch nicht mehr eintreten, wenn sie das gemacht haben.
Warum nicht?
Darum. Und es muss gebetet werden. Warum?
Wo?
In den Kirchen. Und in den Familien.
Okay, so this is really creepy and really disturbing. During our research, it was really hard to listen to this, to be honest.
Yeah.
From 24th of September 1975 to 1st of July 1976, Anneliese has to endure 67 major exorcisms. Did you hear that? 67. Can you even imagine?
No, honestly, no. It's completely beyond any sort of torture that we've touched on before. I think even the Huckster horror house, it's awful.
But that doesn't mean that during this whole time she was just at home and, getting worse and worse. There are periods when Anneliese does indeed feel better and can attend university, and almost none of her fellow students know that she is going through something, or they're not even suspecting anything. I think the Bishop of Würzburg had told the family that they were not allowed to talk to anybody about their exorcisms. The weird thing for me is there exist photos taken by the priest after the exorcisms where you can see the whole family smiling, laughing, having a great time. Even Anneliese, we're gonna show you the photos.
Yeah.
I don't know how this is for you, but I find that so bizarre. When I picture a demonic possession, I imagine it is this kind of ongoing thing, you know what I mean? So it was so mind-boggling to read that she would go through all these things and then at the same time she would still go to university like every other student.
Yeah, I agree. I would have thought that, demons were either in or out, not like a constant back and forth, like some sort of nightmarish demonic hokey pokey. Like you suffer, you got demons, and then you're exorcised, and then you're better. I mean, you probably need some therapy, but that's how it would work.
But it looks like here it was like, hey, it's Sunday, we should do another exorcism, and afterwards we drink some coffee and have some cake.
Yeah. Who are these people?
So then on 3rd of March 1976, which was the Ash Wednesday, Anneliese stops eating because that's what the demonic voices demand. And soon she's very weak. She can hardly go to university. She would also start to punish herself, for example, by kneeling for hours on the floor or banging her head against the floor. At that time, she's still living most of the time in her dormitory in Würzburg. And then starting from April of 1976, she was so weak and sick that she couldn't leave the bed any longer. And one of Anneliese's sisters has to come and stay with her to cover up what was going on. And her fellow students later stated that the sister had stopped them from calling a doctor because, as the sister said, Anneliese is already in treatment and everything is under control.
This is just, it's so, I can't emphasize how upsetting this is, just this whole thing. Because people who are familiar with mental health issues who are listening to this are probably all recognizing very classic signs of psychosis, and it's just fucking heartbreaking.
It is,
It's awful.
You know what I don't get is I understand if you tried everything that you then turn to your faith.
Mm-hmm.
But here it seems like, yeah, we went to the doctor once or twice, not working or not getting better. Yeah.
Right. And if the first, 20 exorcisms didn't work, maybe it's not an exorcism issue.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah. So things are getting worse and worse, as they always do, and only 1 month later, it is already impossible for Anneliese to remain in Würzburg, and she moves to her parents' house, and there it goes from bad to worse. Yeah, she starts to exhaust her body through exercise, for example, doing 600 squats daily. She also started to hurt herself through biting, hitting, scratching. One time she tried to bite a hole into one of the walls, which led to one of her front teeth breaking off. So they often had to tie her to the bed to stop her from harming herself even more.
On the 30th of June, 1976, the last major exorcism is held. And remember, this is number 67. And the next day, on July 1st, 1976, Anneliese Michel dies. Her cause of death is basically starvation. In the end, she only weighed about 68 pounds or 31 kilograms. She also suffered from an acute lung infection. When you look at photos of her before her death, it's difficult and it's absolutely heartbreaking.
I watched a documentary and there they played a few parts of the last audio tape of the last exorcism.
Mm-hmm.
And at first you can hear her real voice and it's sounding so weak. Like,
yeah.
It's even hard to talk about that.
It
it's
is
heartbreaking, and I don't understand why nobody would take her to the hospital at any point of this. And then you can hear in this absolutely weak voice, she begs the priest for the sacrament of the dying. And then once again, you can hear the demonic voice kick in. It's bad. It's horrible.
It's bad.
We should also mention that Anneliese kept saying that not only demons were present, but that many times saints or the Virgin Mary were present in the room with them. I think the Virgin Mary was the one who had told her that, quote, a change will come on 30th of June, end quote.
So predicting her death.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. This is all... It's awful. It's awful. So Father Ernst Alt called the police and told them that a girl who had just gone through months of exorcisms had just died that day.
Can you imagine that phone call?
I don't know. Honestly, no. I can't imagine any of this.
As the police officer, like, you hear that.
What the actual fuck?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So the police investigation is started immediately, and Josef and Anna Michel, the parents, as well as Father Ernst and Father Renz and the Bishop of Würzburg were the main subjects of this investigation. Later, the police also investigated Adolf Rodewijk, because the bishop and Rodewijk didn't have a lot of personal contact with Anneliese, the prosecution didn't really investigate them any further. So in February of 1978, the parents of Anneliese Michel had her body exhumed. The reason for this, they said, was that they wanted to move the body from a simple coffin to a nicer oak coffin. But there were rumors that they also had another motivation behind this move, because apparently, just before the exhumation, a nun had said that Anneliese Michel had come to her in a dream, and that she had stated that her body was still intact and didn't show any signs of decomposition. Which... I mean, everyone knows that's how you check for vampires, but that's for a later episode. So I guess the parents thought that this could prove that Anneliese's death was absolutely supernatural. But of course, when they exhumed the body, it showed all of the expected signs of decomposition. It's like, can you give this poor girl even just a moment of peace?
Right, yeah. So 1 month later, on 30th of March 1978, the trial against Josef and Anna Michel, as well as against the two priests, Ernst Alt and Father Renz, started. The media, of course, was all over it. And even the Vatican watched very closely, of course.
Oh, yeah. The Vatican is always watching.
Isn't that the Illuminati?
I mean, how much of a difference is there between those two?
So the trial, of course, Anneliese's medical history, experts' testimonies, as well as the audio tapes were used as evidence against the four accused. Psychiatrists and medical doctors testified that she showed signs of paranoid psychosis, possibly schizophrenia, as well as the already diagnosed epilepsy, and that she should have been hospitalized and tube-fed if necessary. Of course. Obviously, that should have happened, yeah? The defense lawyers asked for a second set of experts, this time from the University of Ulm, but I don't think any one of you out there is surprised to hear that these experts came pretty much to the same conclusion. The only thing that all the experts couldn't agree on was whether or not Anneliese did suffer from brain damage that could have caused the epilepsy, as well as all of her other mental illnesses. And of course, also the 4 accused were evaluated by psychiatrists. The verdict was that all 4 of them were extremely religious, no surprise there, that they thought that Anneliese's only chance of salvation was through God. Their belief system was described as primitive and naive. According to the psychiatrist Father Ernst Alt, also showed signs of a psychosis of a schizophrenic spectrum. And doctors determined that the exorcist Father Renz suffered from morbus Fa, that's a degenerative neurological disorder. That's not good.
No.
The parents of Anneliese kept insisting that they had absolute trust in the priests, while the priests pretty much blamed the parents because Renz, for example, stated it was not his job as an exorcist to make sure that Anneliese was provided with food and medical care. And all of the 4 accused together pretty much blamed the demon expert, Father Rodewig, because he had told him that nobody ever had died during an exorcism, so it's super safe. So basically what was going on, and nobody feels responsible for what had happened. Nobody wants to take the blame. Everybody's blaming each other.
And nobody blamed a demon, though, did they?
Well, I mean, the demon did what the demons do.
Yeah.
Can't blame them for their nature.
I just think it's interesting that they blamed each other and they didn't all blame the demons. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So another fun fact, one of the defense attorneys of Josef and Anna Michel was Erich Schmidt-Leichner, and he had been a defense attorney during several of the Nuremberg trials. Just thought that's interesting.
It is. And if that's not bad enough, let's now make it a little worse, because now comes something really infuriating. So the prosecution asked for the 4 to be put on trial for manslaughter by negligence. They want the 2 priests to pay a fine, and they don't see the need for a sentence for the parents, as the death of their child was already enough of a punishment. I just need a moment, okay? Of course, the defense pleads not guilty, and they think that all 4 should be acquitted. The trial ends on the 21st of April, 1978. All 4 are sentenced to 6 months in prison, but they don't actually have to go to prison. Instead, they are placed on 3 years probation. 3 years probation for torturing and starving a girl to death. Their religious belief system and them being absolutely convinced of a demonic possession led to reduced liability in the eyes of the judge and was therefore a mitigating circumstance.
I know that most legal experts see the verdict as fitting, but there are some who say that the religious beliefs should not be grounds for reduced liability of an accused. Look, I am no legal expert whatsoever, but on a human level, I do find that verdict a bit shocking. I also think it's shocking that the prosecution asked for even less of a sentence. I mean, what's up with that? I don't get it.
Yeah. Oh, this shit happens today. Today this happens. People refuse medical treatment and their children die for religious reasons. Listen, I'm agnostic and I'm clear about that, but I completely respect everybody's religious beliefs, whatever they are. But that respect stops when you are actually harming another person. It's not okay. I think in this case that when something as awful as what happened to this girl, who was, by all accounts, just physically sick with epilepsy and TB and mentally unwell with what was probably a form of schizophrenia, she's basically tortured to death by the people who were supposed to protect her the most. And it's awful. It's awful. And I think the way the verdict went down was it's more comfortable for people to say that everyone did their best and wasn't it sad, you know? And because her parents, I mean, they were so fanatically religious that it was probably its own form of mental illness. But the whole thing, as my mother would say, was a sin. It was just a sin. It's awful.
I mean, look, let's forget the demons for a moment, because in the end it shouldn't even matter if demons exist or if she was possessed or whatever. It shouldn't matter, because if we break it down to the most basic fact is then there is a girl here who was sick, and the girl stopped eating and she started to severely harm herself. And it's a biological fact that people die when they don't eat for a prolonged period of time. And her parents and the priests very clearly must have been aware that she is starving, and they did not get her to the hospital. That's the reason why this verdict is a bit of a slap in the face for me. It shouldn't matter what you believe in. You are still aware when people starve. rant over.
Yep, I completely agree. It should never have happened then, and it shouldn't be allowed to happen today. I mean, I think adults have a right to refuse treatment if that's what their religious or any other beliefs dictate, but I would argue that a child does not have religious beliefs and therefore should always be treated medically until they're 18 and old enough to form their own opinions and beliefs.
Yes, agreed. And I mean, she was 24, she did refuse treatment, but at what point should you say, hey, enough is enough right now, you are not in the right state of mind to decide something like this?
Well, exactly. And that's a complicated situation here as well. I mean, it's complicated everywhere. It's just awful. It's awful.
It's horrible. And when you hear those tapes, it's horrible. So many experts analyzed this case afterwards, and they were looking at it through all different lenses, like medicine, psychology, theology. One theory that I find highly fascinating is by the evangelical theologist Uwe Wolf. He thinks that the reason for Anneliese's mental illness lies in her strict upbringing and her family's conservative religious belief system. Now, his theory states that in order to have freedom in this very tight-knit Catholic community in this Bavarian village during the 70s, Anneliese could only take on one role, and that was the role of the possessed. The possession gave her the freedom to say what she felt subconsciously, but could never dare to speak. But by letting demons tell her truth, she could not be punished or shamed for feeling the way she felt. Now, I want to be clear, that does not mean that he thinks that Anneliese faked her possession, not at all. It's just a way for her mind to escape her strict religious surrounding.
Yeah, that's an interesting theory, especially knowing that she had delusions and hallucinations regularly, but I don't know. It could be that that's why she said certain things that she said, but I think I would argue that most of that was caused by schizophrenia. But the Catholic Church, on the other hand, states that they still think there's a possibility that Anneliese Michel suffered indeed from demonic possession. I mean, of course they're going to say that.
Yes, but in 2005, they declared that the major exorcism is indirectly at fault for her death. So, I mean, at least there's that.
Yeah.
Another noteworthy theory comes from the US, from the author Felicitas Goodman, and she wrote the book The Exorcism of Anneliese Michel. I have to say up front that I haven't read the book, I only read snippets. From what I understand, she thinks that the medication Anneliese had been prescribed due to her epilepsy was, first of all, the wrong medicine, and that the medicine was a big factor in why the exorcism ended in Anneliese's death. So, according to Goodman, the medication did suppress the brain activity that was needed for the exorcism to work, and therefore the demons could keep returning after each exorcism, which, how did you call it, demonic hokey pokey?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry if this is a very simple interpretation of her theory. There's also a part where she thinks that Anneliese stopped eating because she couldn't swallow anymore, I think, and therefore she didn't take her medication anymore, and that this led to some kind of withdrawal symptoms. It's all a little bit confusing to me, to be honest. If any of you out there read the book and understand Goodman's theory completely, please send me a message.
Yeah, we always like to hear more information about stuff we're not super clear about. I mean, all of these things are possible, and listen, epilepsy meds can be a goddamn nightmare to get right. And the same is absolutely true about meds for any kind of psychiatric issue. Like, even when I went on antidepressants for the first time after my first husband was killed, it took like 4 different kinds to try, different doses. This stuff is hard to get right. And that's partly why people go off meds so often. But at the end of the day, this girl, this young woman, was still tortured to death by her family and her priests. The people that were charged with her spiritual and physical well-being let her down completely, And I hate to even talk about this, but there was a new development in 2016 where a woman has made allegations of sexual abuse toward Father Renz, and also allegations have been made against Father Alt. And so I think future discussions and research going forward about this case will and should absolutely include the very real possibility of sexual abuse of this young woman, at the hands of these 2 priests.
It's definitely a possibility. I actually do think that they might have influenced Anneliese's delusions quite a bit. I read that one of the demons rage against the reforms of the Second Vatican Council that took place in the 1960s. And guess who was also somebody who loved to criticize these reforms? Our friendly neighborhood exorcist, Father Renz. I mean, isn't that just a nice coincidence? And speaking of influence, the Exorcism of Anneliese Michel heavily influenced pop culture. One of the most famous examples is, of course, not The Exorcist, because that movie came out in 1973, I think, but the movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose from 2005. And then there is a German movie called Requiem, and just today I found it on YouTube because I was looking to get it on DVD somewhere, so we will add that link to our sources. Do you think the priests, they were influenced by The Exorcist? Like, that was all the rage?
I was just going to ask you that, because that book was based on another supposedly true account, wasn't it? And then so the book had been out, and then they made the movie, and that was all around the same time. So now I'm wondering how influenced they were.
Like a little bit like the Satanic Panic in the 80s?
Yes. Listen, I think that's a really good probability, and The Exorcist needs its own episode, but I haven't seen either of these movies because I never really watched scary movies. I'm starting to more often. I didn't really find The Exorcist, like the film The Exorcist, that scary, but I don't really believe in demonic possession, right? So like...
The Requiem one, I'm gonna watch it later. I just watched the trailer before we started to record. That one isn't actually a scary movie. It just really tells the story of Anneliese Michel leading up to the exorcism, as far as I understood.
Oh, that just sounds sad. But yeah, the audio from this is enough to keep me up at night. I just feel so sad for this girl, and it was a perfect storm of crazy. It was awful. So please tell me something good.
Today I want to recommend a book. It is by Melissa Moore, and it is called Holy Shit, A Brief History of Swearing. I do love to learn about history, different topics like history of makeup or history of clothing or what did people cook in different eras, Don't you just love those deep dives into some historical niche?
You know I do.
So as the title might already have given away, this book tells you everything you need to know about swearing and profanity. For example, let's look at our beloved Victorian era. Now, as we can imagine, they were quite squeamish about vulgar words. The only problem is they considered so many words to be a taboo and to be vulgar. You could not say legs, that was obscene. You had to say limbs. And you couldn't say kissing, you had to say osculation. You couldn't say the word sweating, it was taboo. You get the idea.
Yeah.
And of course, Melissa Moore also writes about the word fuck and how it came to be a swear word. And did you know that during medieval times, names like Roger Fuck by the Navel or my favorite, John the Fucker or Simon Fuckbutter existed? I think that's highly fascinating.
I love it.
I mean, the medieval times especially, so many words that are deemed to be highly vulgar today were absolutely normal back then. I mean, they had names like Goodwin Cloghunt or Thomas Turd. Completely normal. Goodwin Cloghunt. You just know that would be a character in an X-rated Harry Potter movie, right?
Oh yeah, there's probably some deeply disturbing Harry Potter fan fiction out there featuring Godwin Cloghunt, or there will be soon if there's not yet.
If you want to learn more about this part of history, about swearing, about the words fuck, I highly recommend this book.
Yeah, and I've got another recommendation to add to that book. So My Something Good is a book my friend Susie sent to me after a diagnosis that I had gotten called Swearing is Good for You, The Amazing Science of Bad Language. It's by Emma Byrne, and it's this really fascinating book that kind of explains some of the science behind how swearing will actually help you. So it lowers physical pain, which is why you swear when you hurt yourself. Go ahead, hit your finger with a hammer. See if you don't. It also helps trauma victims. It reduces the risk of violence. And there's just like a whole fuck ton of info on the latest research by neurologists, psychologists, sociologists, all sorts of experts that prove that swearing, when swearing is called for, is really the shit.
That's super interesting. I need to read it because I never swear in German. Like never, except for when I really hurt myself.
Yeah. So
come join our Facebook group.
Yes.
There you find all the sources, all the photos, all the links that you're gonna need. You find awesome people there. You're gonna find great discussion going on there. Follow us on Instagram, follow us on Twitter. What else? Oh, we have a merch store. You're gonna find the link to our merch store on our webpage, which is www.freshhellpodcast.com. And you're gonna find the link also on all social media platforms. What else?
I think that's about it, right? So please, if you have a moment, take that moment and leave a quick review for us if you can on iTunes. We would really appreciate it very much. It does help. What else, Johanna?
Tell your dogs we said hi.
Oh, please do. Give them a tummy rub from us. We know your cats don't care.
No, they don't.
They couldn't care less. But if you yourself are going through any kind of hell,
Keep going. Tschüss.
bye.